Welcome to the show after the show. Thank you for tuning in to Off Menu Bible.
Yes.
Where today we're going to be talking about a very on the menu story, as most of them are. Although people would probably be surprised about some of the stories that are in the Bible that they've never heard of. I know every once in a while I come across one, I'm like, man, I totally forgot that was in the Bible. It's lesser known people, but crazy stories. We'll get into those in the future. You've probably all heard of Hananiah, Azariah, and their partners. You've definitely heard of Daniel. I don't want to say the third one wrong, Mishael. But maybe you haven't. And if you haven't, it's because you know them better by the name Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which is not their real names. These names were given to them. So the question that
their American names would be Fred, Harry, and Jack.
That's few people know that. That's the kind of things you'll learn on this show. So
we're going deep today.
Yeah. I'm glad for you that you tuned in because that's.
I can bring it down. I can take it up. It don't matter.
Yeah. So I can be as smart as Toby. I'm going to put my shades back on.
Wow, your IQ goes up.
Harry, Jack, and what? Immediately. That's
like 5 points.
So the question was, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when they were thrown into the fiery furnace, how hot would that have been on the Scoville scale? And there's an answer to that. And it's 7 times however hot the furnace was before they got thrown in.
Wow.
And the reason we know the answer is because the scripture tells us that King Nebuchadnezzar got so upset
he was mad
that these dudes wouldn't bow down to the huge golden statue that he had made of one of his false gods and dance to the music which he commanded to be piped at the time, and everybody was supposed to bow down. And then somebody came up to him and said, King, we don't want to be brown nosers or tattletales, but we got to let you know how you told everybody in the land that they had to wear a mask or they couldn't go to the grocery store, where we see some people hanging out at their house having fun with their neighbors, throwing a jail. So that's what essentially happened. Somebody ran up to the king and said, I know that you didn't know because they weren't trying to do it in your face and they weren't trying to make you angry, and we know that you can't see them, so we're going to tattletale. Right. The Jewish kids that you brought over, they're not bowing down. Good. They're not bowing down and dancing to the music.
WWF Bible.
So whatever you think you should do about that. And he was incensed. And then he kind of gave them another chance. Like, we're going to play this music again. I'm looking at you. You're going to bow down. And they wouldn't do it. So
the snake comes out of the basket.
Yeah.
Bow.
So then he said, turn the furnace up 7 times hotter than normal.
Bam.
Make it burn 7 times hotter. And we about to toss these boys in. So the way they got those names, so Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, obviously, as the producer pointed out, much more Jewish than Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And Daniel, who's really called Daniel, throughout the entire book, and that might be because he's authoring it, but his name was changed also to Belteshazzar. But he just doesn't get called that very often in the book. And to be honest, you keep reading through the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, it goes back and forth. It actually uses their Hebrew names, more than you would think, because nobody ever uses those names. It's always
Belshazzar in the lion's den.
No,
it doesn't have the same ring as Daniel in the lion's den.
No, it doesn't have the same ring at all.
Yeah.
So they garnered the king's favor first by being able to not only interpret his dream, but tell him. The king wouldn't even tell people what he dreamt. He was like, if you're a magician like you say you are, then you're going to tell me what I dreamt, and then you're going to interpret it. And of course, they were like, we don't have any parlor tricks for that. So they couldn't do it. And everybody was going to get slain because of it. So they're all fakes. Just kill them all. Daniel heard about it, and he was like, yo, bro, why are they about to kill all of us? And the guy who he had favor with, the leader who was going to carry out the mass execution, told him. And he said, listen, go tell the king I want to come talk to him. We'll get it. We'll get the dream. We'll get the interpretation. Give me a little bit of time. Because he was trying to save him and his friends, really. He was trying to save his own skin, hopefully.
Sure.
And then Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael. Because they were all part and parcel. They all got thrown in with all the Babylonian magicians and soothsayers. So Daniel, God gives him the dream. He tells the king the dream. Then he tells him the interpretation. The king's all blown away. Like, man, I love these guys. They're the best. And then somebody puts it in his head. He needs to build this statue and have everybody bow down. And for whatever reason, he was thinking they were going to do it. And they didn't do it. And he said 7 times hotter. And then a really cool thing happens. And so we'll be in Daniel chapter 3.
I don't know why I was thinking it was 4 times hotter, but it was 7.
Well, so that's what we're going to go with today, is like to go off menu a little bit. We're going to be talking about, because there's a lot of messages and stories about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, don't give in, you're thrown into the fire, God will save you, stand your faith, all that kind of, and that's all good. But we're going to hone in on the 7 and the 4. Where you got the 4, more than likely, is that when they got tossed into the 7 times hotter furnace, the king jumped up out of his seat and was like, what in the world? Didn't we throw 3 dudes in there? And they saw 4 dudes. So verse number 1 of Daniel chapter 3, Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits. Do the math for us real quick. What is 60 cubits?
No, 6, 7.
Yeah, 60. So 60 cubits, and the breadth thereof was 6 cubits. And he set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. And Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather all the princes, governors, captains, all these people to come and see what he did. They all came. Verse 4, the herald cried aloud to you, it is commanded, peoples, languages, nations, that at what time you shall hear the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, you fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. So this sounds a lot, this is very similar to what you read about in the book of Revelation and the abomination of desolation and setting up an image and calling it God. And everybody has to take a mark and bow down and do the whole thing. So this is part and parcel of that. And whoso does not fall down and worship, the same hour shall be cast into the midst of burning fiery furnace. And so there's a not very fun consequence to not taking the mark either, and falling down and worshiping that mark and that image that speaks in the end, and there's gold involved and so on and so forth. So there might be a message in here to kick things off in the book of Revelation, to unroll the scroll and get to that point. There are 4 horsemen that are released, but those 4 horsemen are revealed specifically by 4 creatures that fly around the throne of God. So we might be able to learn something from these 4 men that wouldn't bow down. And we may or may not get into that portion of the message today. If we don't, then let me just encourage you. We have a very detailed teaching on how each one of the 4 creatures that escorts or releases each one of the 4 horsemen to unseal the first 4 seals gives us a revelation about how to resist whatever it is that horse, if you will, the spirit that it is bringing. Yeah. And so the 4 beasts, the 4 creatures have 4 faces. So one is released by a lion, one by an eagle, one by an ox, one by a man. And the nature of those things gives you exactly what you need to resist. I apologize that that's off the menu.
You think the man's face...
Because we're not really going to talk about that.
You think the man's face...
Nope, whatever you're going to say, I don't. I do not agree. I do not agree.
Like me, man?
Yeah. Whoso does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. At that time, when all the people heard the sound, they all fell down and worshipped what the king had set up. Verse 8, but certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. This is what we're talking about. And they spake to the king and said, O king, live forever. You've made a decree. These guys aren't doing it. He said, whoever does not fall down and worship, he should be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. What kind of people are like, hey, we want to see some people get tossed into the furnace?
That's another thing I was going to ask you. Was that furnace made to burn people, or do you know much about the furnace?
I couldn't say.
Yeah,
I couldn't say. To me, it sounds like it's a furnace that has existed for one reason or another. Now, a lot of the nature of worshiping is false gods back in the day, and I'm not saying this particular one, but it could have been required human sacrifice.
Sacrifice of babies.
Yeah, so that might have
had to have been a large furnace.
Yeah,
obviously for people to walk into.
And the majority of those human sacrifices, based on what I remember from my studies, so forgive me, I don't have it in front of me, has to do with fire, like the belly of Molech, and sacrificing them in the midst of a fire. It's gross stuff.
I think it was made for human sacrifice.
Yeah, it's very, very possible. So Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods, nor worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if you be ready at what time you hear the sound again, and you bow down and worship, if not, this is in verse 15, you shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, we are not careful to answer you in this matter. We're saying we don't need to answer you that question. This is the deal. Verse 17. If our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king, but if not, then let it be known unto thee that we will not serve your gods nor worship the golden image which you have set up. These boys are serious.
They're bad.
Yeah, I mean, you got to get this image in your head, man. You're talking about a king.
Yeah.
You know, that's something even it's even greater.
He's not playing.
No. He's even greater in presence than a president. It's like the king has all power. Whatever he says goes. Mm-hmm. You're standing in front of royalty. There's this massive statue. Mm-hmm. All of the most, the highest and most powerful people in the land are gathered, all dressed up. They have their families probably. This music is playing. It's like the Grammy Awards, right? Yeah. Is that the one with the big golden statue or the Oscars, whatever?
Oscars.
So they all have their $100,000 gift baskets, full of whatever. And it's a big show.
All wearing their Bucky shirts.
Yeah, I'm sure. And then there's this furnace. I mean, that you can fit a person in.
Yeah. Several. Yeah.
And the king is saying, "You're going to do what we're doing. You're going to bow down, and we're going to toss you in the furnace." I mean, you got to be pretty solid in your faith,
brother. Your faith is to be like, test.
I don't care. Test. And while this is not the off the menu topic, this is like such an important topic, man. That's where you have to get with the Lord. Mm-hmm. You know, we deal with people all the time who are like, I don't like God because of this reason or that reason, or something bad happened in my family, or something bad happened, in the world around me, and I thought God was good. And people that are like, I don't come to church because of the Christians. Even like, was it the Dalai Lama, or I'm trying to one of the famous guys, kind of in the Tibetan, far east part of the world, that said, if it wasn't for Christians, I would believe in Christ, or I would be. So and we get too caught up in blaming God because we are taught that He's all loving and all powerful and all knowing. Right. Then how could these things happen in the midst of a land where a God like that exists? And so I even hear from people that are like, it's not that I don't believe in God, I don't like Him. Like, you don't. Well, then you don't believe in Him. Mm-hmm. Because to believe in American English is like, I agree that He exists, but that's not what the Bible's saying. Mm-hmm. When it says that you believe, you break that word down, it means to walk hand in hand with, to trust in, which is ride or die belief. Come hell or high water, right? David said, though I make my bed in hell, yet will I praise Him. Mm-hmm. I don't care what happens to me in this life. And that's the thing. Jesus said, these signs shall follow they that believe. But so many of us won't believe if we don't have the signs. Why isn't everybody in my family healed? Why doesn't everybody live for? Why isn't everybody blessed? Why could bad things happen? He's saying that was never the promise. In fact, Jesus said, in this life you shall have tribulation. Right. But if you'll get with me, if we can be in relationship, I'll bring you through it. And it won't matter, because you're going to live forever in an eternity where you don't have to deal with this stuff. But right now you do. So
this life is just a vapor.
Yeah. So Christianity is either like a spiritual ATM machine where you have been taught and you've decided to believe that if you put your card in with your name on it, here's my identity, you're going to get good things out. And the minute that it doesn't spit out that good thing, you're like, I'm out. Well, then you never knew the gospel.
And the problem is, let me say, is a lot of that is American Christianity. There are a lot of countries and Christians in other countries that are persecuted terribly, and they're standing in the same shoes as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's real stuff.
Real stuff.
But we don't hear about it a whole lot, and we don't experience it here. This is the land of the free and free speech, and
supposedly,
pretty much.
Sign up for Voice of the Martyrs for a couple months and read the magazines, and you'll see. Or just get online. And
I pray for these people every time I think about it. I really do. That, man, I can't even imagine, but they're going through very similar stuff, and they'll go to go ahead, take my head. So I heard from pretty hardcore.
Yeah, I heard from a guy one time that was chauffeuring around this real powerful evangelist who had all these signs and wonders in his meetings all the time, and he was known when he came over to America to do like I hate to say a tour, but I don't know what else you call it, where he's going a circuit, from
meetings,
from place to place to have evangelistic meetings, and he wasn't seeing the same results, like there weren't as many signs and wonders. And what he was doing over here, and it was a buddy of mine that was picking him up and driving him for at least this section of the circuit, and he was asking him about it, and then asking him about his homeland and the poverty that exists there, and I don't even want to say where he's from because I don't want to get it wrong, but there's plenty of pick and choose. There's plenty of third world countries where there's powerful ministry going forth. And anyway, the story was real sad, and my buddy lives a good life over here. And he told the guy, he said, man, I'm gonna remember to pray for you in your lack and everything that you guys lack over there. And he said the guy started laughing. He was like, no, listen, we're gonna pray for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
Yeah, we're going to pray for you in your excessiveness over here, because what's going on over there is a propellant for the miracles that we see in the presence of God, and what's going on over here is keeping you from that.
Yeah.
So in our excess,
probably didn't see near the miracles here as you see in a
and so then we have an entitlement, like you know, if I'm going to serve you, then basically what we're saying is you're going to serve me. And if you don't serve me, I'm out. But that wasn't the gospel. It says serve me. And let's be in relationship together. Anyway, I think we covered it.
Pastor, they talk about, well, if bad things happen to good people, then God's can't be good. They're taking the devil out of the whole equation.
Out of the equation sometimes.
He's just as real as God is, and he's a ruler of this earth. I mean,
I'd say a general rule of thumb I try to tell people is blame the bad guy for the bad things and the good guy for the good things instead of the reverse.
Because until
you mature a little bit.
He's real too, bro.
Yep, absolutely. Verse 17, if it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. He will deliver us out of your hand. But if not, we're not going to do this. We're not going to bow down. Verse 19, Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was about to be heated.
So
turn up the heat.
Kind of like the bomb that we just took. That was like 7 times hotter than all the other 7 combined, mixed.
Yeah, if you just somehow got here without watching the Potluck Nuggets episode, it was a taste test, a heat test of all the hot sauces at this particular gas station called Buc-ee's, and there's one at the end called the Bomb.
Man,
there's just no reason for that to exist.
No.
That's what the furnace would have tasted like. For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I think you're right.
So 7 times, that's a real godly number, right? God, he just seems to do everything by 7s from Genesis to Revelation. So he's heating it up 7 times hotter, and so that is meant to instill fear into Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who represent me and you in this story, men of faith. So represent you as well if you're a believer. But as things get 7 times worse, here's the principle that happens. You go on and read the story, maybe we get to the scripture, and he commands mighty men out of his army. He said, I want you to bind these 3 dudes, and we're tossing them in the furnace, game over. He turned the heat up so hot that when they got close to throw him in, it killed the mighty men in his army. It was so hot. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego just fell in because the dudes that were holding them like burn up. And they fell in, and they didn't get burned.
Dude.
That's a crazy principle, and we had this message a long time ago, and maybe we'll revisit it, talking about the nature of the enemy. And one of the principles that we figured out is that evil destroys everything, including itself. The devils even fight each other. So here they were trying to do something to intimidate and instill fear into the people of God, and it ended up being their own ruin. Kind of like if they would have known they were crucifying the Lord of glory, they never would have done it. They took up Jesus, nailed him to a cross to try to instill fear into his people. What they ended up doing was ensuring victory for the people of God, which is the same thing that is happening here and may be applicable to us today. Now we're coming out on the other side of COVID-19, but next time, what is it going to be? This won't be the last pandemic. This won't be the last global crisis that we're going to go through. I think we're going to have some good years, in between, but something worse will come upon the face of the earth. And we have to decide right now. We've had a trial run. Are we going to allow the fear to drive us and divide us? Or are we going to realize the more that the devil unleashes, and for whatever reason that God allows, then the more the enemy is going to kill his own self. See what happens? When the towers came down on 9/11, a horrible event, it didn't cause people in that moment in mass to turn from God, but it caused people to run to God. Now, there's been so much time since that happened that people may have changed their mind or gone a different direction. I'm not saying that was like massive revival, but it was for a couple of days.
Oh, yeah.
That was a Tuesday, man. Churches aren't even open on Tuesdays, and they were that Tuesday. And I wasn't even saved at that time, so I had to hear the story secondhand that my first pastor when I did get saved, we were talking about it. He said that was to this day still the biggest crowd they've ever had was on a Tuesday night. So these tragedies tend to open up a path for people to run to God instead of run from God. But the enemy, doesn't matter. He's still, I have to kill them. I have to beat them. I have to. The more he beats on us, the more we run to God, man. So it's gonna end up being his own demise.
Yes.
Verse number 20: commanded the most mighty men in his army. These men were bound. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were. 22. Because of the king's commandment, because it was so urgent, the furnace was exceeding hot. The flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and the three fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. So now get this picture in your head. The Inferno was so hot and so violent, fire just licking out of the top and the sides of this thing, just uncontrollable, that they thought they could take another step or two and get close to, but it was so violent that it burned them to death. And the dudes just fell in. So watch what happens next. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said to the king, true. And he answered and said, I see 4 men loose walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the fourth, in the King James it says, is like the Son of God, but in other versions it says is like one of the sons of the gods, which makes a little bit more sense, because I don't think Nebuchadnezzar would have been of the opinion that God had a son. A lot of people, even a lot of the Jews, I don't think were necessarily tuned in that the Messiah was going to be the Son of God. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I've talked to Jewish people about the Messiah, and they can't understand that it could be God's son, a lot of the ones that I talked to. So I don't think that was a well-known thing. So I think maybe like one of the sons of the gods makes a little bit more sense. Then Nebuchadnezzar, check this out, with the picture we just painted. Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fire. This was a big deal. Yeah. He just watched his men get burned up because they got too close, and he can't help it.
Oh, no.
He can't help but walk towards that fire because of what's going on. So you can clearly see the 3 men are not dead. And you see a 4th man walking around in the midst of the fire. Now, they didn't have this scripture that we have now, but eventually it was revealed where 2 or 3 are gathered. There I am in the midst.
Wow.
That's a real deal.
Man.
That is the manifestation.
Literally, he was right there.
Literally. Yeah, and so people are like, so when we have a prayer meeting, or we're 2 or 3, in the sense that the Holy Spirit lives in you, yes, but that really just takes you just by yourself, right? You and God, and some people say, well, that's the 2, and he's the third. Well, okay, the math gets weird, but I think what he's saying, where 2 or 3 are gathered. Right. That there's a step that's taken, right? That there's some faith that's being implemented there. Where 2 or 3 are gathered, there I am in the midst. Think about Paul and Silas. They were beat. They were stripped.
Chained.
They were humiliated. They were chained in that prison. The devil did everything right.
Oh, yeah.
He hurt them. He embarrassed them. He bound them. He did everything to tear them down. But he didn't know what they didn't know. Where 2 or 3 are gathered. So when Paul and Silas began to sing praises in the midst of that situation, God said,
write the songs in there.
I'm there. Yeah. And the walls began to shake, and you know the rest of the story. So it's a real deal, my friends.
Yep.
Interestingly, in a situation like this, it comes down to what? Don't have more than 10 people gathered together. Then it's don't have more than 5 people gathered together. And then it's stay in really small groups 6 feet away from each other. And a lot of people couldn't stand it. They're like, no, we're going to keep having our regular church service. And I'm not saying that anybody did anything right or wrong, but it might have been a little step of faith to say, listen, where 2 or 3 are gathered, right? It doesn't take 1,000 people. We don't have to fill up our sanctuary. Right. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Where 2 or 3 are gathered. Here's what's interesting about this number 7. Turned it up 7 times hotter. And it's a very specific word for 7, Shiva. And again, every Hebrew letter has its own word picture and definition, its own gematria or numerical value. And every letter is a word, and every word tells a story intrinsic to the letters which create the word, if you will. So the Shiva, the first letter is the Sheen, which looks like this. And if you're thinking, man, that's a Star Trekian thing because of Dr. Spock, well, you look up Dr. Spock in real life. I forget the guy's name. Is that Leonard Nimoy or is that the other guy? Was Spock Nimoy?
Spock. It is.
Yeah, so he's a Jewish guy. He's a Jewish guy. So that's how he came up with that, because the priests in Israel have been doing this since the beginning of time. This is how they lay their hands upon the sacrificial animal and the sins pass on, that whole deal. This looks like a W. It has 3 branches. It has 3 branches, and it means to divide or consume. The next letter is the Beit, the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and it's drawn like blueprints or a floor plan, and it means house. And the last letter is the Ayin, and the word picture is literally eyeball, and it means to experience by sight. So this letter, the 7th letter, Shiva, now watch how this ties together. It literally has inside of it, because of the word 7 rather, with the 3 letters, it literally contains inside of it the story of 3 divided things to be consumed inside of a house, but yet they can be seen.
Wow.
That is the 3 letters. So the ayin points back to the house and saying there's an experience that you're going to have by sight, and it's going to contain 3. And this is the Hebrew word that he uses to describe what he's about to. In other words, what Nebuchadnezzar unwittingly did was define the fire by the fact that we're about to experience something supernatural inside of this house with these 3 men.
3 guys. Yeah.
All contained in the number 7, but that's not the connection point. Now keep that in mind, and here we're about to connect it. It says that Jesus, or the Son of God,
It's Jesus.
who showed up in the fire, was the 4th man.
Right.
So again, we have this number 4 surrounding the nature of who Jesus Christ is. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 8, 1 day unto the Lord is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is 1 day. That doesn't mean that the 7 days of creation were 1,000-year periods. They were evening and morning. They were 24-day periods, but 24-hour periods.
Right.
But this is the prophetic inference. Day 1 is a 1,000-year period prophetically.
Right.
Day 2, day 3, day 4. So on day 4, God created the sun, the moon, and the stars, which is the light of this world. 4,000 years from then, from Adam, Jesus Christ was born and said, I am the light of the world. So he is representative of that 4, the 4th one. And there's a lot of other things that go into it. But here is the crazy thing. The 4th letter in the Hebrew alphabet is the Dalet, and it means door. So it's the door. And Jesus Christ said, what? I am the door, right? No man comes to the Father but through me.
Right.
The 7th letter, Shiva, the 7th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the Zayin. It comes right after the 6th letter, which is the Vav. The Vav is an upright man. The Zayin is a man with a crown on his head. So the number 7, which is representative of the 7th letter, the number 7 says there's 3 that you're going to see inside of a house. The letter 7 says there's 1 who's going to be crowned. So you have the whole thing being pulled together.
That is crazy.
So Nebuchadnezzar unwittingly said, we're going to see 3 guys have an experience inside of this house of flames with 1 guy who is crowned. And then when he saw him, he said, he looks like one of the sons of God. Where 2 or 3 are gathered. Jesus Christ is the door. He is the door.
So I stand at the door.
Yeah. So let me just throw this out there, and we have like 2 minutes, and then we'll sign off. Anytime that you're locked inside of a situation, there's locked as in you can't get through the door because it's locked. You're locked inside of a room. Call that room whatever you want to call fear. We're talking metaphorically, where you feel like you can't move. What do you need? What would be better than anything to have? What's the best way to get out of that room?
With you?
No, you need a key.
Oh, a key.
Right? Yeah. Like if you're locked inside of a room, a key would be a great help, because then you could get out.
Or someone with you to help you kick it down.
Yeah. But a key can get you out of one situation.
Yeah.
It'll fit one lock, right? It'll get you through one door. But what if you're in a situation where you're confined by four walls that are closing in on you, so to speak? You don't have a key, and there is no door anyway. You're just stuck inside of a room. It would take something supernatural. So when Jesus Christ, here, let me try it like this. If we had all of the knowledge of the Bible, we'd have a pretty big key ring. You know, each one being a key.
Sure.
And that could get us in a lot of doors. But Jesus said, instead of having to get that entire key ring, get everything right, just get me. Guess what I am?
I'm the key to everything.
No, he said, sorry to shoot you down. No, he said, I am the door.
Right.
So with Jesus, instead of having a key hanging out your side, you have a door, which means you can throw it up into a wall that has no door, and you have a way out of everything, because that door can be created in any situation. So he is your ultimate escape. You don't have to fear the fire, because Christ will always have a way out for you. That is not a message about how you'll never die, never get sick, nothing bad. That's not what we're saying. We're saying every time we wake up, we're flipping a coin. Heads we win, tails we win.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. What are you going to do? What's the worst you can do? Kill me? We'll go to heaven. That's what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were saying. He might save us, he might not. But we're not bound down, because we're not about what he'll do for us. We're about him. So send us to see him. Send us to see him if you want.
Keep our eyes on him.
Yeah, send us to him if you want. I'm not looking forward to being burned up, but send me to the Lord if you want. If not, I'm going to stay here. And Paul said, to live is Christ and to die is gain. Better for you if I go, better for me if I go, better for you if I stay.
Right.
I'm either going to be there fellowshipping with him, or I'm going to be here talking about him. One or the other.
And when they saw him in the fiery furnace, didn't they start jumping and praising him?
I would assume. I don't think it says anything about that, but I could be wrong. Let me be wrong. Let's see. He answered and said, 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire. They have no hurt. The form of the fourth is like the Son of God. Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the furnace and said, come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth. The princes, governors, captains, kings, counselors, being gathered together, saw the men upon whom the body's fire had no power, nor was a hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of smoke was even upon them, or the smell of fire had passed on them. And then Nebuchadnezzar
bowed to the real God,
was amazed. You want to say he got saved, but the next words out of his mouth, I don't know if he actually got. He had some more issues afterwards, but the very next thing that he said was, "This is now God, and if you don't worship this God, we're going to tear you from limb to limb and kill you and smell your body parts off." That's not really WWJD.
Yeah.
But he was impressed.
Oh,
yeah. So anyway, we hope that you're impressed with Christ.
Totally believed after that.
For a minute.
For a while.
Yeah, so we hope that you're impressed with Christ. We hope that you're impressed with His Word. We hope that we helped you with this often when you study. And until next time.
No matter what you're going through.
Yeah.
You know?
If you learn nothing else, learn this. There's no reason to eat that sauce. Don't eat that sauce. You see the bomb, just keep on going.
Bad.
Get some Tabasco. You're not going to prove anything to anybody.
My stomach has a small hole in it right now.
God bless you guys. We're out.
Love y'all.